All right. Hello, friends, and welcome to the More to the Story podcast. I'm so glad that you have come along for this live edition, which is happening on my Facebook page. And we're thankful for the opportunity to share it with you. This is kind of the end of the year wrap up of the podcast. I have a couple of top 10 top lists that are going to come through. Also, around the same time, I'll be having an episode that comes out of the kind of like the top 5 podcasts from this year. But this is something I did last year. I'm not sure it's going to work every year, but for 2023, this is going to be the top 10 stories from the Wesleyan World. Whatever the Wesleyan World is, that's another story, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. I want you to know this podcast is brought to you by Wesley Biblical Seminary, where we are developing trusted leaders for faithful churches. And my friend Bill Roberts, who's a financial planner. He's a Christian who loves to serve people, and he really is great with helping people who are in ministry think about their retirement. I'd love for you to check out his work at williamhroberts.com. And on top of that, I have something Ryan and Jonathan might want. Maybe I should send them a free one.
Nice.
Somebody sent these to me. They gave them to me.
That's
own
awesome.
mugs. Isn't that cool?
Look at that.
The More to the Story podcast mugs. There are 12 of them. If you're interested, go to andymiller3rd.com and we'll see about getting you one. And also, until January 2nd, my 2 small group Sunday school studies that are available, one on the afterlife called Heaven and Other Destinations, a biblical journey beyond this world, is available there. It's 5 video sessions, discussion guides, and interactive groups. Then there also is another study called Contender, a study of the book of Jude. Those are half off until January 2nd. Here's how you can get that. If you just enter the code HALF, HALF. Is that how that's spelled, Ryan? HALF?
Sure.
Yes, that's it. Okay, great. So you can find that out there. Boy, I really put him on the spot with that one. I really put him on the spot. Okay, I am so glad to welcome into the podcast my friends who are coming to you from various locations. I have Dr. Ryan Danker from Washington, D.C. and the John Wesley Institute, and my friend, Dr. Jonathan Powers from Asbury Theological Seminary. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Ryan, I'm sorry. This is the first time I've had you on. It seems like a shame.
Really? I didn't know that. We talk enough, and I just kind of figured I'd been on this already.
Sure. And obviously a return guest. And I brought this guest in with Jonathan Powers because he was a part of being the #1 story from last year, which was the new Pan Wesleyan hymnal. That was the #1 story last year. But since that happened last year, Jonathan, it's not on the list this year. I'm sorry to say.
The new leather-bound edition is out though now.
Oh, okay.
I got one today.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
can you show us? Oh,
yeah,
it looks
right here.
good.
Very nice. Yeah. So it's cool. Even,
with your name.
Yeah, it was a gift from Seedbed actually. So I appreciate them doing that for me. It's a very nice gift. But yeah, those are out now. So that'll be, number 11 on the list.
Okay, number 11, the leather-bound edition.
Leather-bound hymnal.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of fun way to think about things that are happening in what sometimes is called the Pan Wesleyan world. Those people, those denominations who feel a theological and missional connection to the evangelical revival that John Wesley was a part of leading in the 18th century. And so several denominations find their source there. And Ryan's a scholar of John Wesley, and Jonathan works in liturgical studies and other areas, and I was thinking about this. And part of the reason we made the hymnal #1 last year was because it was this real uniting force for these various denominations. And so not just denominations, because some of them aren't denominations. Some of them are just movements and expressions or institutions. And so we thought this might be a fun thing to do, to think about the things that are happening there. But before I get going, do you all have any comments before we get to the top 10 list?
No, thanks again. Appreciate doing that.
All right, here we go. All right, now number 10, it's coming in strong. We didn't do a lot of debate about this. This is basically my list, so if you don't like it, you can just blame me. But in this moment, I think this is an interesting issue. So number 10 is the doctrine of inerrancy is debated in Wesleyan evangelical circles. And this particularly came last summer when there was David Watson wrote an article about biblical authority. It was responded to by Tom McCall at Wesley Biblical Seminary, one of the institutions that uses the word inerrancy in our articles of faith. we had we entered into discussion. Dr. Murray Vassar did. We had some dialogues. There's good conversations with that. So, Ryan, why do you think this is something that's just coming up? And I think this is a nice, friendly conversation, by the way, and I like it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, no, we're not going to launch at each other. Um, I mean, it's interesting because that debate took place primarily on the pages of Firebrand magazine, where I serve as one of the lead editors, and so I knew about the backstory as much as I did about the reactions to it. You know, we're Methodism is in a period of realignment, as I like to tell everybody, and I think right now the question is, Scripture is authoritative. What does that mean? And so
Sure.
people are looking for different words for that. I mean, I have my stark opinions, and you know them. But it's, in fact, everybody who follows me on Twitter knows I have stark opinions about everything. But um, I think what we're trying to say, actually, what I think about this debate is I think we're actually saying the same thing. We're just refusing to use the same words. So ultimately, I think what traditionalist Wesleyans are going to need to figure out is, how do we say that the Bible is trustworthy and will lead you to Christ-like living? Because that's a Wesleyan way of approaching it. But it was interesting
Yeah,
to watch
and some
David
might also
and
add,
Tom.
not just that, some might add, is it true? So, but yeah, you're
Oh,
right. It
sure,
does need to
sure.
lead to transformation. Yeah.
True, yeah. But Wesley was all about, the Bible leads you to holiness. I mean, that was,
Yeah,
if
sure.
you look at his notes on the Bible, that's what he talked about. So I don't know. It's an interesting period in time where people are looking back at the foundations and saying, what do we actually think about these things? And that's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
part of the story.
That's good. Yeah, I think it's just, and I'm not trying to actually relitigate the debate. There was really well articulated positions between Tom and David there, and Murray Vassar as well. So I won't but I think it's an interesting fact. That's why it's number 10. It's way down the list, but it is something that's happening in this community. Jonathan, you have anything you want to add there?
No, I mean it's the same. As Ryan said, I think um there might be some anxiety around it for some. I don't think that's
Yeah,
everybody. I think some probably do have anxiety about this because of culturally what's happening with in the church on the one hand, but looking at the scriptures, we're wanting to say we respect the scriptures, we find them authoritative, we find them trustworthy, we find them true. No doubt, we find them fully sufficient for salvation and holiness, as we've been talking about. And we do not want to compromise any of those things, and to say there are certain fundamentals that we want to hold to, that the church has held to since before the canon was even established, that has been articulated in the creeds and things like that, like virgin birth. I mean,
yeah,
to say
yeah.
things that are coming out right now, even, like virgin birth, the bodily resurrection of Christ, our bodily resurrection, things like that. To say like we believe this is scripturally true and promises and all of that, because we've seen churches that have not regarded those things as true or scriptural. And so there might be some anxiety around it, but I think there is for a lot of people. I don't know that it's coming out of a place of anxiety, though. I think it's just clarity. They're just wanting
Yeah,
to bring,
yeah.
like Brian was saying, they just want to bring clarity and
Right,
say, how can we just say something very clear and concise and let people know, like, hey, we really do believe this.
right. Yeah, that's good. And I think there's not anybody from, I'd say, I would be one who'd want to emphasize within the institution that I serve the word inerrancy. I think there's power to it. It's one of the strongest possible terms that can be used. But I also, at the same time, am not saying, hey, this needs to be absolutely articulated within every denomination that thinks of itself in a traditional perspective. So
Mhm.
just to kind of like lay that perspective out there. And if you want to see a deeper, longer conversation on this, you can go back to one of my podcasts from the summer where we talked about this with Steve Blakemore, Murray Vassar, and Matt Ayers. I think that's a helpful conversation just to read. Oh, sorry, I lost my microphone there. Just something that we can read and just think through it. I think
Yep.
leading to a place of Scripture's authority and how this can change the world and change life and lead us to holiness, because it is God's true word, I think is something we can all agree on. Okay,
Yep.
that's number 10. Number 9. Now, there's two that are going to sound similar, but because this story came later, it's number 9. We might not spend a lot of time on it, but I'm going to say this. Number 9, Bishop Mark Webb joins the GMC. Bishop Mark Webb, who was serving as a United Methodist bishop in the Northeast. And honestly, even though he went to Asbury Theological Seminary, I didn't know about him. So this was a little bit of a surprise for me. We might pick up more on this later, but this was the second bishop. So what's the significance of this, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I expected it. Of course, I've known Mark for a long time. Or known of him. I've known him for a couple of years. He visited me once in Washington, and it was interesting. We were both in institutions that were on the progressive side of things at that point, and we both connected immediately because of the language. Because evangelicals use a certain language, and they always have, even back to the 18th century. That was, how do you know someone? Well, you listen to them. You can tell.
Sure,
and I picked it up very quickly, so I'm not surprised. Now that conference, he was in the Upper New York Conference. That conference has had a strong evangelical presence within it for centuries.
Yeah,
and that's
sure.
where
That's
where the burned
district.
over district is. Yeah, I mean, the Free Methodists come out of that. The Wesleyans, the Mormons. There's lots of movements that came out of that. Not that I want to link all three of those, so nobody jump on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's a major asset. He's a thoughtful and articulate Wesleyan shepherd of the flock, a real bishop. And I think it's wonderful that we have Mark Webb.
Yeah. I mean, you and I both have also. This should be point 8.5. Andy Miller and Ryan Danker moved their credentials to GMC. How about that?
We're both in the same denomination, Andy. It's a miracle.
Wow, look at that! Who could have imagined? I think it's helpful for us to say, like, we're the little bit that I know. I've met with him a couple of times. He's come and spoke. We have a large group of students at WBS who are in the GMC course of study students, regular master's students, and he came and met with them, and it was just it was like you said, this pastoral bishop who's able to come in and kind of ease people's fears. And so I think it's not just for his personality, but also the fact that a bishop transfer to GMC is significant.
An active bishop.
Yeah, an active bishop. Yeah. I don't know if there's anything to add there, Jonathan, but I'll let you get in if you want.
No, just I want to affirm the importance of the episcopacy in that,
Yeah.
that this is needed. And I know there can be a lot of suspicion of hierarchy and of episcopacy. But what we see with someone like Bishop Webb and Bishop Jones, that we'll talk about later too, is that these are servants of the church. Bishops should be, and that's so clear. And they're submitting to authority, and that can be tough. I know I'm the Anglican, so I'm going to talk
there you
about
go. Bring it on.
Yeah. Submitting to authority, it's actually important for us to know, we submit to authority as we submit to God. It's not about, just the authoritarianism. It's actually saying, no, there's actually a posture that we're taking here. That's important because it helps us keep that posture before God too. But knowing just as God is one who has stooped to serve, humanity,
yes.
condescended, the bishops are in that place as well, and these are ones that trustworthy, good people that truly see their work as service to the church, not as authorities in the church. I mean, there's an authority that comes with it, but that's not the posture that they take. They see themselves as servants of the church, and that's so key.
Yeah. This is a good moment to make sure that this is done well, that it's thought through, and that the administrative, bureaucratic functions don't come to dominate this important biblical historical office. So, all right, number 8, similar in the sense it deals with authority, though some might think the authority, and I might be one of them, that the authority is a little too strong sometimes, and that is the denomination from which I come. The Salvation Army this past summer elected a new general. And I'll just tell you about this process. And Ryan, you might think this sounds like something else, that another global movement, but there is all the leaders come together in one room, and they don't say anything to anybody else necessarily. They get a couple of reports that come out every now and then, and then one of them emerges after some white smoke comes. No. There is one emerges as the new international leader who has the title and the seat from William Booth. So there was a new general. General Buckingham was elected this past year. And I think the significance of it in this moment, particularly, and he's agreed to come on my podcast. So I hope to interview him here in January. We've had to change the dates a few times. Is that this is a moment where clarity needs to be given, as has happened in other denominations, as is happening now in Methodism as a whole. So the real question is going to be, what's going to happen with this general? Will he speak into the issues that are critical toward the expression of biblical fidelity, particularly as it relates with human sexuality? And then there are other issues too that need to come about as well. So I look at this as an important issue because it's a global movement with more than 1 million members of its churches around the world. So, and I got to make the list, and you guys let me keep it on. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you want to add anything about the Salvation Army in that, but I mean, Ryan, you've been to IHQ, so you know a little bit. It's kind of a.
I have. I know exactly where the white smoke came out. That's yeah, right there in the shadow of St. Paul's Cathedral. How appropriate.
It is. It has been there since 1882.
Wow.
Okay, so that's mine. I'm going to go to now number 7, and Ryan, I want you to take it away. The Holiness Partnership, and also some other a publishing house also has come about. Tell us about what's going on there.
Oh, the Wesleyan Holiness Connection and Aldersgate Press.
Yes. Number 7.
Caveat: I'm on the steering committee of the Wesleyan Holiness Connection. So, but I think the news this year is the new leadership transition that took place from Kevin Manoia, who founded the group, to Bishop John Mark Richardson.
Yes.
Who's a Kojic bishop out of Los Angeles. And I love that guy. He sends me text messages. It's 5 a.m. here, which means I don't know why he's awake. But he's always like, Ryan, we need to do something bigger. And I'm like, okay, Bishop. Okay, it's 5 a.m. Let me drink some coffee first. But anyway, the Wesleyan Holiness Connection is one of the largest gatherings of Wesleyan bodies anywhere. There are representatives from, you name the group or the denomination or any, they're there. And I represent the John Wesley Institute on that committee, but most people who are there on the steering committee, at least, represent denominations like United Methodists or the Wesleyans or the Nazarenes, or they have Pentecostal representation, as in with John Mark Richardson and Kojic. It's really an amazing organization, but the transfer from the founder to a new leader that works well and it's going well and then leading into new things, that's a story for Methodism in 2023. Why? Because other parts of the Wesleyan movement are fragmenting. Whereas this group is coming together. And they're also coming together to kind of relaunch Aldersgate Press, which has kind of been dormant for a number of years. But I'm encouraging some, and some others are leading. Barry Callen's still involved in this, and there's some others who are spearheading this. We need more faithful Wesleyan resources for formation and catechesis aimed at the laity. So, yeah, shout out to the WHC and Aldersgate Press.
Yeah. Now is this connected all to the former National Holiness Consortium? Was that the predecessor of this group? A Holiness Partnership? Is that what's the name of it again? There used to be one that had a magazine, and
it started out as a camp meeting kind of.
Oh yeah, this is it,
right?
Yeah.
Like, well, it's kind of iteration. Oh, this one that wasn't?
No. Kevin Manoia founded this one. And Kevin wasn't around when camp meetings were still blazing in the forests, Yeah. What you guys are talking about, yeah, I know. Well, I'm not clear on it, but yeah, there used to be the National Camp Meeting Association, if you really want to go way back there.
Yeah.
And things like the Wesleyan Theological Society even came out of that eventually. Yes. But there's a couple of different groups that were active. Right now, the largest is WHC. Great. That's still with us and still doing things. Yeah.
And we've depended upon other institutions to bring groups together in this, like seminaries. So Asbury Theological Seminary, Asbury University was a key point. And I think that was part of the genius of Henry Clay Morrison, was that the Pentecostal Herald, the magazine, the paper that he edited, was this connecting piece. And that's in part why the Asbury institutions became this almost like clearinghouse within the broad movement. But I think it's helpful for it not just to be connected to the academy, that this is driven by an ecclesial leader. So I'm excited about that. And I was able to be a part of the meeting on behalf of WBS that happened at New Room. So we're hoping to be engaged in the future as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Number six. Number six is this denominational growth. Methodist in the broad sense of word, Methodist denominational growth. Now, there certainly is a GMC that's come about and has grown this year because of disaffiliations. But also, I just want to highlight that other denominations are growing in this period, like the Association of Independent Methodists, Congregational Methodists, Protestant Methodists, Evangelical Methodists. Now, I don't know too much about Evangelical Methodists, but particularly Congregational and Association of Independent Methodists. My friends who are in those denominations, or those, the aim is an association, they are just incredibly busy. These are not they're not very top heavy, and they might have like a part-time secretary who's, at least that's the case with AIM, who facilitates the administrative work. But the people who are they volunteer to lead, they're all over the country, just like talking to groups, serving groups. So I think this is a significant moment for these other denominations that have often been sidelined to really have opportunities to be a good fit for churches that are disaffiliating. Do you guys know of other groups beyond the ones that I've mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, Free Methodists.
Oh, yeah.
Grown. Of course, the Global Methodists. My denomination, the ACNA, has grown.
Yeah,
I
tell
mean,
me about that. I don't know much about. I mean, I know about the ACNA, but
for sure.
I haven't heard much about there being groups that have come to the ACNA.
There have been a handful. It's not many. It's nowhere near the others, like those that go with the others. But I probably know of 5 or 6. I know 5 at least, pastors that were ordained UMC that have all in the last couple years, transferred into the ACNA, and a couple of them that have taken congregations with them. And another one that I guess I know 4 that have done that, and one that's kind of actively pursuing that at the moment. So it's not big, but the ACNA in general is experiencing growth. It's not necessarily because of that, but yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah.
I know a few other former United Methodists who are going ACNA as well.
Mhm.
It's an interesting phenomenon. It's not like it's not like the 4,000 clergy who joined the GMC, but it's a noticeable pathway.
Mhm.
Well, and this shows too that there's a movement to like people who want more liturgical high church expression. Do you think that that's it? Is it? Forgive me, and Jonathan, if I love for you to jump in here a second. Not just like a style question. Is there also like a theological rationale? Do you think for people going there, or is it more uh, liturgical or aesthetic?
I mean, I think it's a mix. I think it's a number of things. And I mean, Ryan can definitely speak to this from his own Anglican, like we're both Methodicans. But his yeah, so a few things with it. I think that there's some trusted structure that people want, maybe coming out and saying like I've not been part of structures that I've trusted. And so I've heard I mean, I'm just going off, it's all anecdotal things that people have told me. Somebody said I've just not trusted the bishops, for instance, that I've had, but I like this structure better. And these are bishops that I think actually believe the Bible, and can say the creeds without crossing their fingers and things like that.
Yeah.
There is a big draw to saying we want to be grounded. I mean, it's still kind of a structure thing, but we want to be grounded in a liturgical tradition, in something that does ground us, in a sacramental tradition, especially, and one that is carried throughout the years. And, as our own president here would say, Dr. Tennant said, not something that was made up last Tuesday. And I'm not talking about a denomination or anything like that. I'm just saying like a way of worshiping, he says like, we're sitting in things that have been throughout the church, and there's substance to it. A lot of people finding, I'll tell you a couple things, honestly. a number of people said they found a breath of fresh air because they don't feel like they have to make worship meaningful. You just
Wow.
step into it. You're not making it meaningful. It's not about the experience of worship.
Mm.
It's about
Hmm.
just coming in and worshiping together, and that's it.
Hmm.
And so it's
Yeah.
a breath of fresh air to them. And the second's been preaching. They've said, I
Yeah.
don't feel like the whole thing relies on the whole experience, quote unquote, of worship. It's not about the sermon. That's one part of so much more. And they've said, I've just found such a freedom in that I want to be in that. And so those are some of the things.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a number of others, but just since you brought up the worship piece of it,
No, I think it's good. That's exact. Thank you so much for addressing that. Ryan, you want to add anything there?
Well, I mean, it's a historic pattern. This has been happening amongst Methodists for centuries.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, these are the heirs of Charles Wesley.
Mm.
I mean, John never left Church of England, as I like to remind everybody, but Charles was adamant about it. And in fact, some of the people that John Wesley ordained in 1784 ended up Episcopalians and ordained at the hands of Episcopal bishops. So that, I mean, the leader of American Methodism before Asbury came, Joseph Fillmore, became an Episcopalian. So it's, this has been happening for a long time. Back then, it was the liturgy and apostolic succession, and I think probably for many in the 18th century, it was just staying a part of what they considered to be the established church, even if
This
it
is really
wasn't.
good, Ryan. Oh, sorry to interrupt you. Finish what you're saying there.
No, well, I was just saying, even though I'm well aware that the Episcopal Church was not established necessarily, but
No,
it
yeah.
sure seemed like it. So anyway,
This is what's interesting is like 1784. This is the moment when Wesley ordains the various people, and as a result of this, I do think we're going to keep coming back to this date, and we're going to think about this more now for what it means to exist as a church. What does it mean to be a denomination? Why do we have denominations? And also, you bringing up the change, to the leadership of Francis Asbury. I think a lot of this, like the groups that I named, and maybe some that are, even though we have some ACNA people connected to us here at Wesley Biblical Seminary, a lot of the denominations we serve would be more on the Asbury side, not Asbury Seminary College, the Francis Asbury side of the movement. And maybe sometimes I don't like low church, high church. I don't love that language, but more revivalistic, more conversion focused. Not that those things don't happen in other places, just like everything Jonathan said aren't things that don't happen in the so-called lower church sort of environment. But I do think this is going to, and sometimes point number 10 about inerrancy comes to be a part of these, same discussions. So I think this is going to be a part of the continuing conversation of what happens in these movements. And I'm hopeful that even things like having the Wesleyan Holiness Partnership becomes a stabilizing factor and a connecting factor in this. Even though I just jumped back to another point, I was talking about the growth of these other denominations in light of what's happening in the United Methodist Church. All right, so that was 6. So I had inerrancy, Bishop Mark Webb, a new Salvation Army General, Holiness Partnership. Number 6, the denominational growth. Number 5, and this is fresh off the presses, as in the last 48 hours. And Jonathan and I might say the least here in light of our jobs, but 2 evangelical Wesleyan seminary presidents have resigned in the last 48 hours, or transition to new roles. That might be a better way of saying it. So I'm not the PR person here, but just I think in 2023, these are things that have happened. So Ryan, why don't you, since Jonathan and I might not want to be the ones to jump in here.
I'll just say real quick, I concur.
I concur. Yeah. I mean, you could do a Reagan thing and just say, I don't recall. Well, it's always good to bring it up to get her. Anyway, no, we this is a time of transition. I think it's a hit to the Wesleyan world in a sense that these two men, who all three of us know these men very well.
Yeah.
They're friends of ours. Let's be honest. We think very highly of both of them. My hope for them is that they can continue to be faithful witnesses, because they've always done that, and I have no doubt that they will. And I mean, Tim's been at Asbury now for 14 years, right, as president.
Mm.
And what an amazing tenure.
Yeah.
Record enrollment, record fundraising, expansion of programming, on and on and on and on. The centenary that he covered in 2023.
Well, end of 22 to 23, yeah.
Right. That's why I was confused. I'm also a Duke graduate, so I don't keep track of everything in Wilmore. Um, the I mean, what a record that Tim leaves behind. And of course, Matt actually was at WVS for not too long, but he still left a great record
Yeah.
of growth and connections and expansion, and he's to be commended in such a short period of time, relatively speaking, of leading so faithfully. So those are my comments about these two guys that we think so highly of. And goodness, trying to replace either of them, that's going to be interesting.
I'll be like Jonathan. I concur. It's good.
I concur.
All right. So that was number 5. But I think it's significant. So number 4. Now that the order of this is a little funny, but I say number 4. It was very soon into the new year, like one of the first few days of the new year, we got word that Bishop Scott Jones transferred to the GMC. Bishop Scott Jones, who's a scholar, who'd been a Wesley scholar, and functioned in the academy as a pastor, but then was a bishop for I think 16 years. I put this higher on the list because it was the first. He was the first one to transfer, and the GMC wisely had a path for this to happen in their transitional book of discipline. And then as these conferences emerged all over the country and world, there was a need for a bishop. And we were so glad that they were present. And we could talk about this in a few ways. We already talked about the importance of the role of bishop, the ecclesiological role, but also, I mean, I think this is a historic piece as well, because this was the first one. Would either of you like to say anything about this?
Well, I mean, I'll jump in with Bishop Scott. I mean, I think it was a bigger splash than when Mark Webb did it. Probably one, because he was the first active bishop to do it. I think we need to reiterate that there have been, what, 5 bishops?
That's
6
true. Mike Lowry too. Yeah.
Well, there's more than that. I can't remember all the names off the top of my head, so I'm not going to try.
That's
But
fine.
yeah, definitely Mike Lowry. My goodness, what a force. Retired or not, I don't care. Mike Lowry is a force. Scott Jones wrote the book on United Methodism.
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, and he comes from a family. Again, it's fun. I know all these people. The Jones family has been a part of United Methodism for decades, and not just a part of it. I mean, integral, faithful leaders. Greg Jones, his brother, was the dean of the divinity school when I was at Duke. Susan, Greg's wife, was my candidacy mentor for ordination. I mean, and then of course, Scott and Greg's dad had been the dean of Duke Divinity School. So there's a long relationship with United Methodism there, but also he wrote the book on Methodism that everybody read, on United Methodism that everybody read, called The Extreme Center.
Right.
And so there was almost this sense amongst some people, and I'm being really careful because I don't want to step on third rails here, because I think I love everybody. There was a sense in which if the guy who wrote The Extreme Center is leaving, then something is going on here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the Extreme Center itself is leaving, then what does that mean? I think that shook some people up.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
That's a good word. I think highlighting that book and what this means about what the center is and what's happening in United Methodism now is it's not in the center. Then those who were in the center now find themselves on the far right of that movement. This is a problem of using directional terms, but it is significant. Jonathan, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, just a different approach or a different side of all this is, I mean, they definitely need our prayers, not just because of what they're doing. I mean, definitely, always, bishops need our prayers, but they need our prayers. They're carrying a lot right now.
Yeah.
Of them are carrying a lot and are just in high demand. They're doing a lot of problem solving. They're having to help set direction. I mean, I agree with Ryan. It was a brilliant move on the GMC's part, Transitional Leadership Council's part, to have a pathway already ready. Say like,
Yes.
we already know how we're doing this, and that was good. There's so many things they're still just trying to manage and figure out, especially for this convening conference coming up. Um, need our prayers for that, but also just in the sense they're having to travel a lot and
Yes.
do a lot of meetings, a lot of ordinations, a lot, there's just a whole lot that is on the shoulders of very few people at the moment. And I know they're very ready to have more help. And so just pray for endurance for
Yes.
them.
Thank you for saying that, Jonathan.
Yeah.
That's really, and I know, like, in your dad serving as the president pro tem for the Kentucky area. I forget the name of that conference.
Mid-South
Mid
Conference.
South. Okay, got it. Yeah. And so you might know some of that through him. And as
Mhm.
we've been working with a variety of leaders, we're just aware of these. And then everywhere we go to kind of let people know that we're able to serve them and help them in their theological education, those bishops are there and they are in the spotlight. And
Yeah.
that's a heavy light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is. Yeah.
All right, so we have that as number 4. Bishop Scott Jones joins the GMC. Number 3, I have a former Nazarene on the call, so this will be good. But the Nazarene Church stepped up to the plate, and they are trying to avoid the challenges of the United Methodist Church. And the Nazarenes have pulled the credentials from some high-profile, at least one high-profile pastor, over issues related to human sexuality. So I think this is a significant moment for that denomination. And on my podcast, I had some conversations with conservative and liberal perspectives on both sides of the Nazarene conversation and the United Methodist and the Salvation Army. And when that happened, these events hadn't happened. So I think this is an important moment of accountability. And this is in part why we have denominational systems, is that it is a means of presenting a unified vision of who we are. And if it's going to exist, there needs to be accountability, because if there's not accountability, we end up having more schisms. So I think that's a significant moment. Now, do you guys agree? I put this toward the top of the list. And number 3, I've just and I'll highlight too, some of my colleagues here at Wesleyan Biblical Seminary put together a book responding to another book of why the Nazarene Church is right on human sexuality. So there was significant attention given to this, and I just want to applaud my friends in the Nazarene Church who are working hard to kind of hold the ground here.
Yeah, I was going to give Matt Friedman a shout out, but you just did it. So it's the Church of the Nazarene is, I think, facing these issues more honestly than the main line did. So for so many years, we just wanted to pretend like it was okay for everyone to have all kinds of opinions, even if they were contrary to the actual canons of the church that everyone supposedly agreed to.
Yeah.
And what that did to both conservatives and liberals is that it introduced a lack of integrity into the institution that wasn't necessary.
Yes.
And so, and of course, people ask me, what do I hope for progressive Methodists? I said, I hope they can be as people of integrity, because I know that deep down that they are. And that's my hope for them. But anyway, I know we're not focusing on progressives, but with the Nazarenes, what's interesting is this is not the first time they've done this with credentials. This is the first time that social media has reacted so swiftly and caused such a stir. I could go off and name a number of people who've quietly been, dismissed from their orders for holding exactly the opinions that the pastor of San Diego first held. What's interesting about this particular case, though, is that it follows the general superintendent's declaring that their ethical standards are doctrinal.
Yes.
Now, there were some who had a fit about this, but the reality is, if your ethical standards as a church aren't doctrinal, then don't have them.
Right.
Yep. If you want to separate doctrine and ethics so thoroughly, and of course, too many people separate doctrine and liturgy. But anyway, I won't go on that soapbox. Doctrine and ethics have to go together, and the general simply reminded everybody that that's just the case. I was a little disappointed by some of the social media reactions of
Oh,
Nazarenes who
sure.
should know better. But
Yeah.
let's all walk with integrity. When in whatever denominational group we find ourselves in, following Jesus, let's at least have basic integrity. And I commend the Nazarenes.
Yes. Good word. Yeah, I think it's a clear moment, and that separation. That's exactly what that's what the new general of the Salvation Army has to face. There's a in the articles of faith that every salvation assigns. There's a doctrinal statement, and then there's the word therefore, and then the ethical statements,
Mhm.
and the exact same thing's happening. You say, well, I'll take the doctrines. I don't know if they really want to take all the doctrines, but nevertheless, they have those, and then often wanting to remove ourselves from the way that those are played out. So,
Mm.
all right. So that was number 3. Coming down to number 2. Now, this has been a part of many other pieces that we've said earlier, so it won't be a surprise. But I think the number is significant, and that's this number 2: disaffiliations from the United Methodist Church. The number. My friend who is calculating all this, Mark Tooley, who works with Ryan. Ryan works at the Institute for Religion and Democracy, is keeping a daily count probably of what's happening. So, what is the number today, Ryan?
Oh, it's 7,600 and something. I could text Mark, but it's 7,600 plus disaffiliated. Oh, not just this year, but total in the last number of years. What's significant about that, and it's just a massive schism. I mean, on both, and it's not just the disaffiliations that are schisming. Churches schism like this.
Yeah.
Let's be clear about that. um, what we have here is 1 out of every 4 United Methodist churches in the United States has not only decided to leave, but has overcome all the hurdles and all the process and all the turmoil that comes along with the disaffiliation process. And it's just amazing to me. 1 in 4. I mean, that's just massive. And I was talking to some friends here in Washington. They said, well, how big is this? And I said, well, there are 6,000 parishes in the Episcopal Church, and there are
Wow.
7,600 United Methodist churches that just left. And everybody's like, oh, because everybody drives by an Episcopal church all the time.
Yeah, sure. That's a good
um,
comparison.
and yet this is 1,600 more. So, Jonathan, I don't know how many parishes are in the ACNA. Is it 1,600?
Yeah, about that. So I think if you combine the Episcopal and the ACNA, you would have the number of people the number of churches that have left the United
Wow.
Church.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And now in prayer, by the way, I think we do need to continue to pray for the United Methodist bishops that they might, because they're all in shock. I mean, the whole institution's in shock because what happens when you lose a quarter of yourself?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's something else to add to the prayer list, isn't it?
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Jonathan, do you think schism's the right word to use
For what's going
for what's
on.
happened? What's happened with
Yeah.
these
I mean,
disaffiliations?
yeah, definitely. I mean, you just see that you see it in so many places right now because of I mean there's a rendering apart, right? I mean that's
Yeah.
what it is. It's a schism that's happening in that. And especially if you go back to read Wesley's sermon on schism,
Yes.
you start to see a lot of it's like, okay, no, he's naming a number of things here that we have to be mindful of.
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, so yeah, and I mean everything Brian's saying is so significant. The prayer part of that, the bishops in the Methodist Church are in shock. A number of pastors are in shock or just confused. They don't know where to go. Or like where to go with their churches, what to do. I don't mean necessarily go denominationally, but like just where to go forward, with their
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
There's just I'm not in all of that. But I know enough people that are connected to it that just there's enough backbiting going on both sides that I
It's
just
bad.
yeah,
It's
like,
challenging.
a lot of people are just really abused and really hurt on both
Yeah.
sides.
That's
And
true. I'll
That's
say
that's the
give a
thing you
little
have to
positive
remember.
word about some of it is that I this fall for me, if you'd have talked to me in August, I would have never imagined what this fall would have looked like for my schedule. I've ended up being in, I don't know if quite a dozen, but close to it, churches that have disaffiliated across Mississippi.
Mm.
Some who the church won their vote, they won the percentage that they needed, 67%. But then actually the ones that have been the most encouraging have been churches that have lost the vote. Um, I went to West Point, Mississippi. There is such a place, by the way. I went to West Point, Mississippi, Starkville, Mississippi, just here in Ridgeland, Mississippi, and those are three that come to mind immediately that lost their vote, and immediately new congregations formed the next week.
Right. Right.
And I walked into these situations ready, because they just need a preacher. They need somebody who can come in and preach. So here, Wesley Biblical Seminary, and we're going out and taking these on. I've become a circuit rider. I've done sometimes 3 on a Sunday. And so like, as I've been in these environments, I'm ready for them to be just a turtle shells, like, but what I found actually are vibrant communities, like people who are just like, they're able to express things that they haven't been able to express. There's a joy, there's excitement, and then there's also quite a lot of questions, no doubt, and some uncertainty for sure. But I do think this is an exciting moment for Wesleyanism, for Methodism as a whole. And so, yes, there's hurt. Yes, there's some sin happening on both sides. But at the same time, many of these churches that have disaffiliated are really in beautiful places.
Well, can I say something too, really quick to
Go
this?
ahead, Jonathan. Yeah.
I've talked to so many people who have attended these convening conferences for the annual conferences, not
Yes.
and they have just talked about how wonderful the worship has been, for the GMC in particular. And even some of the Methodist Church, just to say, like, there's been a sense of like, we can just, we're kind of past this now. Like, we can just move on, and there's a sense we're just coming together and we're just worshiping and we're focused on God. And in most of the ones I'm hearing from the GMC, they said there's just a sense of the Spirit moving and encouraging and a peace about it that they had never experienced in their whole ministry. And it's just been significant. Like, so many people have said that. And so, I think there's something to that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I've heard that you hinted at it, but I've heard that from United Methodist too.
Mm-hmm.
Some who came back from annual conference to Lake Junaluska spoke of the same thing.
Yeah.
It's nice to be together when we're not at each other's throats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To actually, annual conference, you sing the hymn, and are we yet alive? But for the longest time, there was a question mark there. There's not a question mark in the original text. It's, we see each other's face and we're equipping, we're moving forward for the work ahead. That's what that hymn's about. And I think, hey, if that's what happens after the end of what I often call the Methodist realignment for everybody, then good.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think that's a good number 2. But number 1 was certainly something that hit everybody's social media and was something that was we couldn't have predicted that this would happen, but we thank God it did. And I'll let Jonathan go first on this. But the number one story in the Wesleyan world is the work of the Spirit in the Asbury Awakening. And sadly, I didn't get to the Holy City myself, but we have somebody who was there. So, Jonathan, tell us, why is this the number 1 story?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. I mean, a surprising, unexpected work of God, right? Like, it just, if we're going to use Jonathan Edwards, the great Calvinists.
Yes.
But I mean, there was something just so amazing about it. It's like so genuine about it, that, like, when this happened, it's not new to Asbury. There's been these outpourings, revivals, different things like this that have happened in the history of Asbury. And just knowing the leadership, the president there, I know the provost over there pretty well too.
Yeah, I think you do. Yeah.
Too.
Who's that again, Jonathan?
Their name's Carrie.
Yeah, you go.
Something.
That's my mom. Yeah. But so I'll just give a little bit of narrative here, like personal narrative, because that's typically how we talk about these things. I was teaching a class. My office is right here, and there's a classroom like right next to my office, right over here. And I was over there teaching a class when all this happened. I was my phone started blowing up with texts. People saying something's going on in Hughes Auditorium. Hey, just thought you'd want to know. You might want to come over to Hughes. And this is when it was like 100 people, over there.
Yeah.
This wasn't like the world coming in. It was just like 100 students and faculty and staff that were over there. Um, and said, but something really significant is happening. And so, I'm teaching on it, and there was a student who had graduated from Asbury that was in that class, and so we were on a break, and I just said, "Look, something's going on here." I was like, "Do you want to just go over? Like, do you all want to just go over?" So, like, after the break, we just went over and just, it was
Yeah.
just walked in, and there's just a peace and a gentleness
Mm.
to it, and everything, just very genuine. A lot of prayer, saw a lot of people praying with each other. At that time when we went over, there wasn't like, I know a lot of what got posted on social media was a lot of the music and some of the speaking and stuff like that. That's not what was happening. It was just prayer,
Mm.
praying together and just sitting still and being in the presence of God. And for me, there were a few things. And I've written about this, I've published on it a couple places now. Um, but for me, one of the things that I was saying is, like, I think what these outpourings do, what these revivals do, is kind of shake us and stir us and awaken us to what God is always doing. It's just in a kind of a sped up kind of way, right? And kind of a magnified kind of way. And it's like, why were so many people wanting to come to Hughes? Because there was a sense God is here. God is here. It's like, well,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Israelites were going to the temple for the same reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
We go to worship every Sunday for the same reason. For the same
Amen.
reason, we just forget,
Mm.
and a lot of things distract us. But
Yeah.
it's like, no, this is what worship's always supposed to be. Every time we
Mhm.
come, we've just like we have a habit of messing that up.
Mhm.
Um, but this is like stirring us to remember that, and to be aware of it. So there's so much of that, but there was so much healing and reconciliation and with God, with one another, all kinds of things. And so that first day, it was just really simple, really gentle, and it kept that same spirit about it the whole time. But more and more people kept hearing about it, more and more people kept coming to it. And so it was really, really fascinating. And then you see, what does it mean in the age of social media?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
again, it's not that these haven't happened before, but now that social media is here, it's getting projected and publicized more than before. And so that just made it very interesting and very strange in some ways, even though they really fought against that
Yeah.
there, saying like, we really don't
Yeah.
we want you to be here and be present, not trying to broadcast this everywhere. So, some of those things. One other thing, just really quickly, some people have said, why does this keep happening at Asbury? Like, do they know how to
Conjure.
manipulate people?
Yeah.
Yeah, conjure it, manipulate people, do all this. My friend Teddy Ray actually, I think, had one of the best thoughts on this, reflections on this. He was looking at it and he said, when I think about this, I think of Psalm 130. And Psalm 130 has this line that says, more than watchmen wait for the morning, more than watchmen wait for the morning. It says, people that are looking for God. He says, those are people that posture themselves in a place to look for God and God's movement. And they
Mhm.
keep that posture. He says, and he said, I've been at Asbury, I've been part of Asbury. And the thing I know about the people there is they continually put themselves in a posture to see God
Yes.
and to see God moving. And he said,
Yes.
so Psalm 130 might actually tell us, why does this keep happening at Asbury?
Wow. Oh, I hadn't heard that. That is great. Great. Oh, I love that image too. It makes me like, I feel like we should just stop right there. Let's have that posture, folks. That's the word for
Yep.
2023. Um, Ryan, but I will let you get in. It's
Oh well, I could just say
um
I concur, but the no, it was fun to watch him from a distance. And in fact, I ended up writing about it for the Living Church because Episcopalians kept coming to me and saying, "What in the world is going on?" and
yeah.
so they needed somebody who could speak Episcopalian, so they called me and they said, "Write us an article for the Living Church about this," and it was published and it helped the Episcopalians and the Anglicans understand more clearly. Um, because revivals like this don't break out at high mass at Anglo-Catholic parishes regularly. Um, they have different kind of experiences than this, but it was amazing to watch and I love what Teddy said. That's so true.
Yeah.
when you're in communities who expect God to be there, it changes our vision, it changes our view. And people always ask, well, why was Wesley so successful? Well, in his own words, he watched for the showers of grace.
Mm-hmm.
He ran after them.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to be.
Beautiful. Let's watch for those showers of grace. What a good picture. Thank you, Brian. Well, guys, thanks for coming along for this. Just want to encourage people. If you see this on YouTube, would you subscribe? Would you share this? There's a lot of hopeful words for what God is doing. Kind of as C.S. Lewis says, Aslan is on the move. And so I think reflecting on these stories, yeah, there's a few that are a little tough to hear, but at the same time, there's a lot of hope in this. Again, encourage people, if you're interested in some of the things that I talk about at the front of this podcast, at andymiller3rd.com. That's andymillerii.com. Check out like some resources that could help you with small group materials and that kind of things going into 2024. Jonathan, Ryan, do you want to give any advertisements or anything that's coming out?
Well, I can tell you all that the Faith Once Delivered, a Wesleyan Witness to Christian Orthodoxy is going to be published January 2024 by Seedbed. So the great work of the Next Methodism Summit. And at the same time, as both of you know, the Next Methodism Summit Holiness is meeting next month to write a document on holiness of heart and life. I think that's going to be one of the stories of 2024.
Uh-oh, he's predicting. He's making a prediction. Actually,
I'm making a prediction.
It was a story last year, the first Wesley Summit. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Well, this time we have 80 scholars from an even broader array of denominational communities, and so the John Wesley Institute's excited to welcome these people to historic Alexandria, Virginia, once again.
There it is. And Jonathan, you've had a book come out this year, right? That you edited?
I did, yeah, a Wesleyan theology of baptism. So dives into a lot of different topics around baptism, theologically and kind of practically, pastorally, I should probably say, both theologically, pastorally. Not that those are separated, but and a lot of great scholars that contributed. Very thankful for their work, and that's through Cascade. You can find it on Amazon through Cascade's website, but it's New Life in the Risen Christ is the name of it. New Life in the Risen Christ. Ryan actually came up with that title. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
Wow.
no, we were talking one day, and because I said something, and you said like, "What about this?" I was like, "Oh, I like that better." So, New Life in the Risen Christ, and then, but a Wesleyan theology of baptism is the subtitle.
That's great. I know one of our great adjuncts here at WBS, Stephen Bruns, worked on that. And
Yes.
I could have made this a story. Interesting enough, I don't know if I've told you guys this, but Andy Miller III and his children were baptized in 2023. That could have been So I moved into the GMC, and we felt like it was just the right time. We actually. It might not fit. Maybe there could be. We ended up, because of some of the social dynamics, we ended up doing it with the WBS faculty, and in this community that kind of was a part of my coming to here. And so, anyhow, I hope. Here's what I hope. This is like my grown-up Christmas list of for this year. That a 2024 story will be the Salvation Army reinstitutes the sacraments. How about that? That would be a good one. Yeah. So we'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming along. Thanks, of course, to Jonathan and Ryan. Thanks for checking out this podcast. We appreciate you all. Appreciate you guys, you two guys, and anybody who's listening to this podcast. Thanks for joining us today.